When this military dog parachuted from 10,000 feet, nobody could predict what he would do upon landing. But the moment his paws touched the ground, he didn't just save a life, he changed the fate of the entire operation. The interior of the military transport aircraft flying over Siberia's frozen wilderness was filled with tension. The icy mountains and endless white snow cover stretched below like the end of the world. Captain Albert Sullivan checked his map while glancing at Storm, the specially trained German shepherd beside him. This was no ordinary mission. American scientists were trapped in a secret research base near the Russian border, and weather conditions made normal rescue operations impossible. Despite being only 2 years old, Storm had participated in 25 successful missions, saving countless lives with his extraordinary abilities in bomb detection. But today was different. For the first time, he would parachute from 10,000 feet in -40-degree weather, and Albert's heart was heavy with anxiety. "Parachuting in this cold is suicide," muttered the co-pilot, shaking his head. "A dog can't survive in these conditions." Storm had saved Albert's life 3 times before, in North Korea, during an Arctic submarine rescue, and in Greenland. As Albert checked Storm's specially designed NASA thermal suit one last time, he looked into the dog's calm eyes. There was no fear there, only endless trust in his handler and unwavering dedication to duty. The thermometer outside read -42 degrees. At this temperature, exposed human skin could freeze within minutes. 3 days ago, a terrifying message had arrived from the research base. Russian special forces have surrounded the base. 4 scientists trapped in Glacier Research Laboratory, oxygen running low. "We have 48 hours. What made the situation even more dire was that these scientists were working on the Pentagon's most classified climate change project, research that could potentially reverse global warming. When the aircraft's rear door slowly began to open, the icy wind that rushed in whipped their faces mercilessly. Below them, Siberia's endless glacial terrain stretched out like a giant frozen carpet. The target area was only 5 kilometers from Russian airspace. Complete secrecy was essential to avoid an international incident. "This is madness," shouted the commander over the radio. "Nothing can survive in that cold," Albert replied firmly. "Storm was born for Arctic conditions. I trust him with my life." In reality, Albert was filled with anxiety too. This operation was so risky that even the Pentagon's highest officials had hesitated to approve it. However, the trapped scientists had made a revolutionary discovery about reversing climate change, and this information could not fall into enemy hands. If they failed, information that could save the world would be lost forever. 30 seconds. The pilot shouted over the roaring wind. Albert gripped Storm's harness tightly. The dog would use a specially designed tandem parachute system that would automatically separate at a certain altitude. The technology was highly advanced, but it had never been tested in such extreme conditions before. Albert looked into Storm's eyes one last time before the jump. The dog's expression showed that familiar, unwavering determination. Albert remembered the incredible intelligence Storm had displayed in past missions. The dog didn't just detect bombs, he could read people's emotional states and sense danger before it materialized. 10 seconds, came the pilot's voice. Albert took a deep breath. This wasn't just about rescuing 4 scientists anymore. Now, Albert jumped from the back of the aircraft with Storm. Those first seconds felt like time had stopped. The -42-degree cold penetrated to their bones despite their protective suits. As the wind battered their faces, the snow-covered ground below rapidly approached. Storm didn't move at all, lying in Albert's arms as if asleep. When they reached 1,500 feet altitude, Storm's parachute automatically opened. The dog gently separated from Albert and began dancing in the icy wind with his own parachute. Albert squinted down to see if the dog was landing safely. Storm was descending calmly and controlled, as if he had been doing this for years. The landing was much more brutal than expected. Albert landed on the hard snow layer over the glacier, while Storm landed in a nearby snowbank. The cold was so intense that Albert's breath instantly froze. When he looked at his thermometer, the number shocked him, -47 degrees. Albert immediately began searching for his dog. The blizzard had reduced visibility to 5 meters. "Storm, where are you?" he shouted, his voice disappearing in the wind. When he found Storm a few minutes later, the dog was completely unharmed, and even more surprisingly, had already begun sniffing around to track the trapped scientists. "Incredible, buddy," Albert whispered, stroking Storm's head. The dog's thermal suit was working perfectly. "You're a real Arctic warrior." Storm lifted his nose to the air and sniffed deeply. Then he began walking determinedly in a specific direction. Albert checked his GPS. The dog was heading exactly toward where the secret base should be. This couldn't be a coincidence. After walking in the blizzard for half an hour, Albert saw a light in the distance. Storm had picked up his pace, as if sensing he was approaching his target. But when they got closer, Albert's blood ran cold. The secret research base was surrounded by Russian soldiers. "How is this possible?" Albert muttered. "This operation was completely classified. How could Russian forces have arrived so quickly?" Storm suddenly stopped and pawed at Albert's leg. The dog's behavior told Albert that something was wrong. Storm pointed toward the Russian soldiers and then looked in a different direction, as if trying to say, "Don't go there, come here." Albert looked in the direction Storm was indicating. Under the ice, a faint reddish light was glimmering. Could this be a secret entrance? He wondered. Storm walked determinedly toward that light. Under the ice was a metal hatch. When Albert opened the hatch, he saw a secret tunnel leading downward. This was an emergency entrance, not shown on the map. As they advanced through the tunnel, Albert heard distant voices. These voices sounded like the scientists. Storm increased his pace, as if he had caught familiar scents. When they finally reached the secret laboratory, Albert was shocked by what he saw. 4 scientists lay unconscious with oxygen masks attached. The laboratory's oxygen system had malfunctioned, and dangerous gases were accumulating in the air. "Dr. Chen, Dr. Martinez," Albert shouted as he approached one of the scientists. The man weakly opened his eyes. Who are you?" Dr. Chen whispered. "I'm from the rescue team. We're getting you out of here." Dr. Chen grabbed Albert's arm with his trembling hand. "Research, data, very important. Russians want to seize them." Albert looked around. The laboratory was filled with highly advanced equipment. Giant screens along the walls showed complex formulas and climate change models. These people had truly discovered something revolutionary. Storm suddenly began giving warnings. The dog's ears were upright, his body tense. Albert knew this behavior very well. Danger was approaching. "Did the Russians find this place?" Albert asked in panic. Dr. Chen shook his head. "No, something more dangerous. Laboratory's nuclear reactor, damaged, radiation leaks started." Albert's heart jumped to his throat. Radiation leakage could kill them all. Was this why Storm was warning? "How much time do we have?" Albert asked. "At most, 1 hour," Dr. Chen whispered. "Then this area becomes uninhabitable." Albert immediately opened his radio. "Base, this is Albert. Emergency situation. Nuclear leak. Send evacuation helicopter immediately." The response from the radio shocked him. "Albert, we can't send a helicopter due to weather conditions. The storm will last at least 6 hours, but we have 60 minutes, Albert shouted. "Sorry, Albert, you're on your own." Albert closed the radio and looked at Storm. The dog's eyes showed that familiar determination, as if saying, "We'll find a solution." Albert began examining the laboratory. They needed to find a way to escape quickly. Storm suddenly ran to a corner and began pawing at a metal panel on the wall. "What is it, Storm? What did you find?" When Albert opened the metal panel, he couldn't believe his eyes. Behind it were old Soviet-era snowmobiles. These vehicles looked like they had been left over from the Cold War era, but they still appeared functional. "Storm, you're a genius," Albert shouted. He quickly moved the snowmobiles out and began loading the unconscious scientists onto them. But time was running out rapidly. The radiation detector Albert carried was beeping faster and faster. They had at most 30 minutes left. As Albert drove the snowmobiles out of the tunnel with the scientists, Storm was running ahead, showing the way. The blizzard continued, but the dog seemed to see through it. Suddenly, Russian soldiers began firing at them. Albert accelerated the snowmobiles. Storm was running beside them, constantly checking behind and warning of danger. After 3 hours of a desperate and death-defying race, Albert finally saw helicopter lights in the distance. American rescue forces had arrived. As the helicopters landed and began loading the scientists, Storm collapsed from exhaustion beside Albert. "You did it, buddy," Albert whispered as he hugged the dog. "You saved everyone." Behind them, a massive explosion shook the ground. The laboratory had exploded, sending a huge fireball into the Siberian sky. If they had been even a minute late, everyone would have died. "Storm," Albert said to his dog that night in their small room at the base, "you didn't just save 4 scientists, you also exposed a much bigger conspiracy." The next day, Albert and Storm were called to a special mission. The Pentagon's intelligence chief held a secret meeting with them. "Captain Sullivan," said Colonel Johnson, "thanks to your operation, we made a very important discovery. It's impossible for Russian forces to know about the attack on you in advance. This means there's a traitor among us." Albert looked surprised. "How can you be sure?" "Because only 5 people knew the operation information, and one of them was exposed thanks to Storm's detections." Albert didn't understand. "How can Storm detect a traitor?" Colonel Johnson smiled. "After your rescue operation, Storm began behaving aggressively toward a specific person. This person was Communications Officer Major Mitchell." Albert remembered that moment. Indeed, Storm had never warmed to Major Mitchell, constantly observing and being tense around him. "Storm's behavior made us suspicious," the colonel continued. "Taking the dog's instincts seriously, we put Mitchell under surveillance. And we were right." Colonel Johnson handed Albert a file. Inside were photos of Major Mitchell's secret meetings with Russian intelligence. Mitchell had leaked your operation information to the Russians. If Storm hadn't pointed him out with his instincts that day, we could never have caught this traitor. As Albert looked at the file, Storm sat calmly at his feet. The dog's eyes showed that familiar alertness. "How do you understand these things, Storm?" Albert whispered. "You're not just a dog, you're a real detective." In the following weeks, Storm's extraordinary abilities attracted even more attention from the Pentagon. The dog could read people's hidden intentions, an ability scientists couldn't explain. That night, Albert was walking with Storm in the garden. The dog suddenly stopped and sniffed deeply. Albert recognized this behavior. But Storm had detected something. Storm ran toward the base's security wall and began pawing at a specific point. When Albert illuminated a tiny hole with his flashlight, he saw a small electronic device inside. This was a listening device. Storm had detected it. Albert immediately called the security team. When the arriving experts examined the listening device, they determined it was highly advanced technology and of Russian manufacture. "This device has been here for at least 6 months," said the security chief. "Who knows how much classified information has been leaked?" Albert stroked Storm's head. "You're a real security system, buddy. You found what our technology couldn't." The next morning, an urgent call came from the Pentagon. Albert and Storm were wanted to join the president's special security team. "Captain Sullivan," Colonel Johnson said on the phone. "Storm's abilities have reached the Oval Office. The president wants the dog to be part of the special protection team." Albert was surprised. "Presidential protection? That's a huge responsibility. We've seen how reliable Storm's instincts are. We want the best for the president's security. That week, Albert and Storm flew to Washington, D.C. On their first day at the White House, Storm immediately proved himself. When a group of visitors arrived, Storm began behaving aggressively toward one of them. When the security team checked the person, they found a hidden camera on him. This person was trying to spy at the White House under the guise of being a journalist. "Incredible," said the Secret Service chief. "This dog noticed what none of us could." As days passed, Storm's performance at the White House became legendary. The dog not only detected security threats, but could even sense the president's stress levels. When the president had a difficult day, Storm would go to him and lay his head on his knee. One day, the president called Albert privately to the Oval Office. "Captain Sullivan," the president said, "Storm isn't just my dog anymore. He's all of America's dog. He's the living symbol of national security." Albert looked at Storm with pride. The dog sat calmly at the president's feet, ears upright and eyes alert as always. "Mr. President," Albert said, "Storm is just doing his duty, but I think he understands how important this is." The president smiled. "This dog's story should be taught to children as a lesson. He's a perfect example of courage, loyalty, and intelligence." That night, Albert and Storm were walking in the White House garden. Under the lights of Washington, Albert looked at his dog. "Storm," he said, "you came from that glacial desert in Siberia all the way to the White House. You're a true American hero." Storm wagged his tail and licked Albert's face. The journey that began when they jumped together from 10,000 feet had brought them to the most important mission in history. And this story was just beginning, because Storm's abilities were developing more each day, and who knows what dangers he would eliminate in the future. When Albert looked into his dog's eyes, he saw not only loyalty but also endless intelligence and determination. Storm wasn't just a dog. He was the most extraordinary being the world had ever seen. If this incredible story of courage, loyalty, and the unbreakable bond between a soldier and his canine partner touched your heart, please share it with others. Stories like Storm's remind us that heroes come in all forms, and sometimes the greatest acts of bravery come from those who ask for nothing in return except love and trust. Hit that share button and let the world know about this extraordinary dog who changed everything.